Holy Gospel according to St. John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When the crowd saw that neither Jesus nor his disciples were beside the sea, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum looking for Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly I tell you, you were looking for me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the word that endures for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For it is on him that God the Father has set his seal." Then they said to him, "What must we do to perform the works of God?" Jesus answered them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent." So they said to him, "What sign are you going to give us then, so that we may see it and believe you? What work are you performing? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, 'He gave them bread from heaven to eat.'" Then Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." They said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Last week in our gospel lesson in John chapter 6, we joined the multitudes who sought out Jesus, all 5,000 plus, who were gathered in the grass. And we all came with our needs, and we still have our needs in this life. And upon our faith stepping and following Jesus, and in the hopes of at least catching the hem of his garment for healing, or hearing the words that he had to offer, another need arose in the midst. We needed nourishment. When you have a crowd like that, you have to plan for food. And indeed, God supplied all of the needs and fed the 5,000 plus, and God feeds us daily as well. What a gift that is. And we explored last week how Jesus gave thanks for that gift that surrounded him. And the gift that was put into Jesus' hands, well, as we explored, there was sudden abundance. Did you pray through that this past week? Did you note those gifts that surround you in your daily walk? I encourage you to start each day with a prayer of thanksgiving to God for providing safety for you during the night while you were sleeping. And pray that God will open your eyes to more gifts throughout the day. What a way to start a day. That's a good breakfast. Note that the gift of bread and fish was what those gathered needed to sustain them throughout that day. The gift kept them somewhat alert, somewhat conscious, so that they could be present to hear the words of Jesus and be touched by his love and be encouraged to go from that place with nourishment and share that love. That's what they needed. Perhaps not what all of them wished for. God supplied what they needed. Now, in a crowd of 5,000 plus, I'm willing to bet that there was at least one in the crowd who took a look at the fish and bread and had something to say about the menu. And perhaps the Lutherans in the crowd were making plans for serving coffee the next time around. And there had to be that group that was whispering over in the corner, complaining about how poorly planned the event was with logistics. Their ancestors had complained. God had used Moses' leadership to bring the people of Israel up out of bondage from Egypt, as you well know the story. God rained manna down from heaven. Talk about meeting your needs. They practically walked on their food out in the desert. That's ultimate service. And the gift was right there in front of them. Now, there's no Hebrew name for this crusty cuisine that lay on the ground. The word manna actually means, what is this? God supplied their needs in a way that they had never experienced before. Of course they were asking, what is this? It wasn't the juicy melons from the Nile River plains. It was unofficially known as, what is this? And unfortunately, the question was not asked in the same manner in which we hear Martin Luther ask the question in the small catechism. Martin Luther, as he explores the Lord's Prayer and as he explores the Creed, Martin Luther asks in between each phrase, what is this? No, it was more like, what is this? Instead of that positive sense of the phrase, that Luther phrase of what precious gift or truth is this? What does this mean for us? And we will hear this as we proceed in our liturgy today. As we enter the holy meal, I ask you to listen for those words, this. This is my body. What is this? And ponder upon the truths of what is this gift. The people of Israel were no different than we are. We know what we want. We know what that comfort food is, the fast food of life. The drive-through food of life is much more convenient. We have our wishes that sometimes are informed by what our neighbors possess. We want to keep up with the Joneses, as the phrase goes, and have the same expensive toys and be happy like they appear to be. And we have hopes and dreams that, yes, God most often plants within us the desires of our hearts. But when God gives us gifts and wants us to move up out of Egypt or move out of anywhere, to move forward or even take a couple steps backward from where we are going, when God taps us on the shoulder or dramatically opens the earth up all around us and forces us to come to a complete stop in the journey, God still gives us the gift of sustenance. God says, hey, it's time for a new direction. I encourage you to read the scriptures for next week. The scriptures, one of my favorite scriptures in the Old Testament, is of Elijah sitting under the tree waiting to die. And God brings him sustenance. And God actually has to come a couple times and shake him and wake him up and say, here's breakfast because you've got a journey. You're not going to sit under this tree. You've got a journey ahead of you. God sustains us. And that, when God feeds us to move on, that's where the challenge lies. What is this? What is this gift of life that God has given? Oh, we thank you, oh God, for this gift, was our lesson from last week. Oh, that gift that was in front of Jesus and was in front of the crowd. This week our lesson is, now what are we going to do with the gift? Jesus says, embrace this gift. Jesus says, come, follow me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Take this gift of true bread from heaven. Cherish it as a gift. Spend quality time with it. Gnaw on that bread of life. Chew it. Let it fill you. Let it sustain you for the long haul. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. What is this? What is this true bread from heaven? I love the hymn that we're going to sing in a couple minutes. What feast is this? Number 487 is our hymn of the day. That familiar tune brings me back to childhood memories of what child is this? The same tune, Greensleeves. The reflection of that beautiful gift wrapped up in swaddling clothes, embraced by Mary and adored by those who were gathered. This gift was certainly wrapped differently than anyone expected. But this gift was from heaven. This gift, this true bread, was from heaven. And this gift was and is what we need. Are you hungry? What do you need for God to supply? What brings you to worship today? There's a question for all of us to ask. What is this? What is this moment in which we are in the midst of this very moment? Are we here just to have our bellies filled for our own purposes? Or are we here to worship and adore, to partake of this foretaste of the great feast to come? Are we here to take the bread of heaven for that journey that we have before us, to take that step of faith and join other hungry journeyers, to all who have been fed by the same source? Are we here realizing that others have come before us and walked this way and have been fed in the journey? Are we here to chew on this food from heaven in word and sacrament, and to be led into the next steps of our journey, knowing that God will faithfully lead us there and sustain us in the journey? Are we here to invite others to partake of wholesome goodness, which is wrapped in an unpopular and often unfamiliar form? What is this? What is this? May we always ask that question in faith. What is